Detective Jack Lawson had seen his fair share of violence in the streets of New York. But nothing had prepared him for what was about to unfold that night. It was close to midnight when the radio crackled to life in his unmarked police cruiser. All units. Possible burglary in progress. Bronx. 115th Street. Shots fired. Any available units. Respond immediately. Jack reached for the radio. This is Detective Lawson. I'm 3 blocks away. Responding now. He flipped on the siren. Weaving through the dimly lit streets of the Bronx. The neighborhood was quiet, save for the occasional distant sound of sirens and late-night arguments. He pulled up to the given address. A rundown apartment building with flickering streetlights and graffiti-covered walls. As soon as he stepped out of his car, a sharp scream pierced the air, followed by the unmistakable pop-pop of gunfire. Jack drew his weapon and sprinted toward the sound. The door to the apartment was ajar. The wood splintered from forced entry. Inside, the living room was a mess, furniture overturned. Glass shattered. A woman lay on the floor, her chest rising and falling in ragged breaths. Blood pooled beneath her. Jack knelt beside her. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" She coughed weakly, her voice barely above a whisper. Please, protect them." Her eyes darted toward the hallway before she let out a final breath. Her body going still. Jack's grip on his gun tightened. He moved cautiously through the hallway, heart pounding. At the end, a bedroom door was open. Inside, he spotted them, 2 identical girls, no older than 12, cowering in the corner, their wide eyes locked onto his, filled with pure terror. Before Jack could say a word, a shadow moved in the doorway behind him. He spun just in time to see a man in a black ski mask raising a gun. Instinct kicked in. Jack fired first. The bullet struck the masked man in the chest, sending him crashing to the ground. Another figure lunged at him from the left, but Jack dodged, using his momentum to slam the attacker against the wall. The struggle was brief, ending with the second assailant unconscious on the floor. The girls hadn't moved, frozen in shock. Jack holstered his gun and approached slowly. "I'm a cop. You're safe now." The twins stared at him, their small hands gripping each other tightly. "What's your name?" he asked gently. A hesitant voice answered. "Emma," one of them said. "Ava," the other whispered. Jack took a deep breath. He knew, without a doubt, that these girls were in serious danger. And somehow, their survival had just become his responsibility. Jack drove them straight to the NYPD's 14th precinct, avoiding sirens and drawing as little attention as possible. Emma and Ava sat silently in the backseat, their eyes locked on the city lights flashing by. They didn't cry, didn't ask questions, just sat there, pale and silent. That in itself unnerved him. Once they arrived at the precinct, Jack guided them into a small, private office. A pot of stale coffee sat on the desk. Paperwork was scattered across the table, and the fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead. He handed each of them a bottle of water. "You guys all right?" he asked, crouching to their level. Emma nodded slightly. Ava just clutched her sister's arm. Jack sighed and leaned against the desk. "Listen, I need to know what happened back there. Who were those men?" Neither girl answered. "Did you know them?" He tried again. Emma hesitated before shaking her head. "They came out of nowhere, broke in. They killed our aunt." Her voice cracked at the last part, but she swallowed hard, holding back tears. Jack's jaw tightened. He had suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed sent a fresh wave of anger through him. He took a deep breath and ran a hand through his hair. "You have any other family? Parents?" The twins exchanged a glance. Emma looked down. "No, it was just us and Aunt Lillian." Jack exhaled sharply. That complicated things. A knock on the door made all 3 of them jump. Jack turned as Captain Reed, his commanding officer, stepped in. The older man had graying hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Lawson, I need a word," Reed said. Jack stepped outside, closing the door behind him. "You really stepped into something tonight," Reed muttered. "Feds are already sniffing around. They want the girls." Jack frowned. "The FBI? Why?" "They won't say. Just that the girls are coming with them." Jack's gut twisted. Something felt off. With all due respect, Cap, those kids were just targeted by a professional hit squad. We can't just hand them over without knowing why. Reed sighed. "Listen, I don't like this any more than you do. But we don't have a choice. They're not in our jurisdiction anymore." Jack clenched his fists. His instincts screamed that giving up the twins would be a mistake. Inside the office, Emma and Ava sat quietly, whispering to each other. Jack made a decision. Give me a few hours. Let me find out what's going on before we hand them over, Jack said. Reed studied him for a long moment before nodding reluctantly. All right, but make it fast. Jack re-entered the room. Emma, Ava, we're leaving. Emma blinked. Where? Someplace safe. The girls hesitated, but then Ava reached for his hand. That was all the confirmation Jack needed. He led them out the back exit. Into the night. Jack had driven through half the city before stopping at an old safe house, a small apartment that used to belong to a retired officer he trusted. It was off the books. No official record of its existence. He locked the door behind them and exhaled. We should be safe here for the night, he said, setting down his gun on the table. The girls sat on the worn-out couch, looking around. The apartment was sparsely furnished, but it was clean. Jack checked the locks again, ensuring every window was shut. Then, just as he turned away, the lights flickered. Jack stiffened. Something wasn't right. He reached for his gun just as the sound of glass breaking echoed from the bedroom. Before he could react, the front door burst open. A masked man lunged at him. Jack barely managed to dodge, rolling to the side and firing a shot. The attacker collapsed, but another was right behind him. The girls screamed as the second intruder grabbed Ava, dragging her toward the door. Jack shot again, hitting the attacker in the shoulder. Ava stumbled free, running back to Emma. A third man appeared, raising a silencer-equipped pistol. Jack had no time to aim. He tackled the man, slamming him against the wall. They struggled, fists and elbows flying, until Jack finally drove his knee into the man's stomach, knocking him out cold. Silence. The girls clung to each other, their breaths ragged. Jack wiped the blood from his lip and stood, chest heaving. One of the attackers, barely conscious, laughed weakly. You can't protect them, he croaked. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Jack clenched his jaw and knocked the man out. He turned to the twins. We're leaving now. They grabbed their things, and Jack led them out into the cold night. This wasn't just a random attack. Someone powerful wanted these girls. And Jack was starting to realize, this was only the beginning. Jack's heart pounded as he guided the twins down the narrow stairwell, his gun gripped tightly in his right hand. The apartment safehouse had been compromised. Whoever was after Emma and Ava had resources, intelligence, and no hesitation to kill. The fact that they had tracked them down so quickly meant that there was a leak somewhere. Outside, the city was alive with its usual chaos, car horns blaring, neon lights flickering against the rain-slicked streets, and people bustling about, oblivious to the danger lurking in the shadows. Jack pulled the girls close as they hurried toward his car, parked a block away in an alley to avoid detection. Keep your heads down, he whispered, scanning the streets. Emma clung to Ava's hand, both girls visibly shaken. Jack could hear their ragged breathing, but they stayed silent, showing remarkable resilience for their age. The moment they reached the car, Jack popped the trunk, pulling out an emergency duffel bag filled with cash, burner phones, and extra ammo. He tossed a dry hoodie to each of the girls. Put these on. We don't want anyone recognizing you. Emma hesitated. Where are we going? Jack shoved the duffel bag into the passenger seat and started the engine. Somewhere safe. The city lights blurred as he sped through the streets, heading toward the interstate. He had no concrete plan yet, but he knew one thing for sure. New York was no longer safe for them. As he turned onto a quieter road leading out of the Bronx, his instincts screamed a warning. A pair of headlights flicked on behind them. Jack's grip on the wheel tightened. A black SUV had just pulled onto the street. Matching his speed, he made a sharp left. The SUV followed. Shit, he muttered. Ava turned in her seat, eyes wide. They're following us. Jack pressed the gas. The car shot forward, weaving between late-night traffic. The SUV accelerated to match his speed. Then came the first shot. A silenced pop shattered the rear windshield. Glass exploded into the car, and the twins screamed. Jack swerved hard, dodging a second bullet that embedded itself in the dashboard. Stay down, he barked, yanking the steering wheel and flooring the gas. The SUV was gaining on them. Whoever these people were, they weren't planning on letting them leave the city alive. Jack gritted his teeth. eyes scanning the road ahead. Then he spotted it, a construction zone up ahead. Barricades narrowing the street to a single lane. Perfect. He slammed the brakes hard. The tires screeched against the asphalt. And the girls yelped as their bodies lurched forward. The SUV, caught off guard, sped ahead for a split second before its driver realized Jack wasn't in front of them anymore. Jack didn't give them time to react. He spun the wheel and took a sharp right onto a narrow alleyway. Barely squeezing through, the SUV slammed into the barricades behind them, skidding to a stop. Jack didn't wait to see if they were still moving. He gunned the accelerator, heading toward the interstate out of the city. They needed to disappear. Now, the road stretched endlessly in front of them as the neon glow of New York faded behind. The only sound was the distant hum of the engine and the occasional sniffle from Ava. Jack exhaled, shoulders tense. "You okay back there?" he asked, glancing at the rearview mirror. Emma nodded, though her expression remained grim. Ava wiped her eyes and whispered, "Where are we going?" Jack didn't answer right away. He was thinking. The safe house was burned. The NYPD had a leak. And the feds were involved. He needed someone he could trust, someone outside of the system. Then it hit him. Upstate. "I know a guy who can help us." Hours later, Jack pulled off the highway, navigating the winding roads leading toward the Catskill Mountains. The air was colder, fresher, and the traffic was non-existent. Nestled in the thick woods, far from prying eyes, was Martin Rhodes, a former NSA analyst turned hacker for hire. Someone who owed Jack more than a few favors. Jack parked in front of a rustic-looking cabin, the only light coming from the porch lamp. He stepped out, scanning the trees. A camera above the door whirred, tracking his movement. Then a voice crackled through a hidden speaker. "You really shouldn't have come here, Lawson." Jack sighed. "Open the damn door, Martin." A heavy pause. Then the metallic clunk of locks disengaging. The door creaked open, revealing a man in his late 40s. Unshaven, wearing sweatpants and a hoodie with an old CIA logo. "You're lucky I still like you," Martin muttered. Jack gestured toward the twins, who were huddled together in the car. "I need your help." "And so do they." Martin's gaze flicked between Jack and the girls. Then back to Jack. He let out a long breath. "This better not get me killed." Jack put a hand on his shoulder. "No promises." As he ushered the girls inside, he couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. Whoever was after them wasn't going to stop. And Jack had a feeling they had only just begun to uncover the truth. The cabin was dimly lit, the scent of coffee and old books lingering in the air. Martin Rhodes, ex-NSA analyst turned underground hacker, studied Jack and the twins with a sharp gaze. The man had seen a lot in his years, but even he seemed wary about what Jack had dragged to his doorstep in the middle of the night. "You look like hell, Lawson," Martin muttered, pouring himself a cup of coffee. Jack ignored him, guiding Emma and Ava inside. The girls were exhausted, their small frames wrapped in oversized hoodies he had given them earlier. They sat together on the worn-out couch, clutching each other like lifelines. "I need you to look at something," Jack said, pulling the small metal pendant from his pocket, the one he had taken from the twins' murdered aunt. He placed it on the wooden table in front of Martin. "I think there's something hidden in it." Martin raised an eyebrow but took the pendant, running his fingers along the smooth surface. "Looks ordinary to me." Jack shot him a look. "You owe me, Rhodes. Just check." With a sigh, Martin stood and walked over to his workstation, a chaotic mess of monitors, keyboards, and wires. He sat down and pulled a small precision toolkit from a drawer, carefully prying at the pendant's edges. Then, there was a soft click. The pendant split open, revealing a tiny chip no larger than a fingernail. Martin whistled. Well, what do we have here?" Jack leaned in, his pulse quickening. "What is it?" Martin inserted the chip into a decryption module, his fingers flying over the keyboard. The monitors flickered before filling with lines of encrypted code, scrolling too fast for Jack to decipher. "Give me a minute," Martin muttered. "This encryption is top-tier government level." Emma and Ava sat up, suddenly alert. Ava whispered something to her sister, and Emma nodded. Jack caught their exchange. "What is it?" Emma hesitated before speaking. "Our aunt, she told us never to let anyone take that pendant. She said it held proof of something terrible." Jack felt the weight of their words settle on him. "Proof of what?" Martin scoffed. "Oh, You'll love this, Lawson. He turned his monitor toward them. On the screen were classified documents. Heavily redacted but still readable enough to send chills down Jack's spine. Project Gemini. Subjects: identical twins. Status: ongoing, experimental trials continued. Jack's stomach clenched. Jesus Christ. Martin scrolled further. It gets worse. According to this, our dear Uncle Sam, or someone within the system, has been conducting illegal genetic experiments on twins for over 2 decades. They were looking for something. Enhanced cognition? Telepathic communication? Who the hell knows? Emma and Ava flinched at the mention of the word experiments. Jack turned to them. Did you know about this? Emma shook her head rapidly. No, we always felt like we were being watched. Aunt Lillian moved us around a lot. She said we had to stay hidden. Martin clicked on another file. A list of names appeared. His face paled. Jack leaned closer. What? Martin swallowed hard. Most of the kids on this list, they're dead. Jack's heart pounded. And the ones who aren't? Martin exhaled sharply. Missing. Emma and Ava's names were the last 2 on the list. Jack's jaw tightened. They're trying to finish what they started. Martin turned to Jack, his face serious. Whoever is behind this, they're powerful. If they want these girls back, they're not gonna stop. Jack clenched his fists. Then we make sure they don't get them. Jack barely got 2 hours of sleep before his phone vibrated on the wooden nightstand. He groggily reached for it, seeing an unknown number flashing across the screen. He hesitated before answering. A deep voice, smooth yet authoritative, came through the line. Detective Lawson, you're making this harder than it needs to be. Jack's body tensed. He sat up, reaching for his gun. Who the hell is this? A pause. Then, someone who wants to resolve this peacefully. Hand over the girls, and we can forget this ever happened. Jack's grip on the phone tightened. Yeah? And what happens to them if I do? You already know the answer to that. Jack's blood ran cold. He turned toward the living room, where Emma and Ava were curled up under a blanket. Martin sat at his desk, oblivious to the conversation. Who am I talking to? Jack demanded. The voice remained eerily calm. Nathaniel Cross. Jack's pulse spiked. The name was legendary in the world of corporate and political corruption. Cross was a billionaire with ties to everything dirty in the government, black ops projects, human experiments, military contracts. Jack had thought Cross was just a rumor. But now, he knew better. How did you get this number? Cross chuckled. You're a detective. Figure it out. Jack gritted his teeth. You're not getting the girls. A beat of silence. Then, Cross spoke again. That's unfortunate. The line went dead. Jack immediately turned to Martin. We need to move. Now. Martin frowned. What? Before he could finish, the windows shattered as smoke grenades exploded into the cabin. Go, Jack shouted, grabbing the girls and shoving them toward the back door. Footsteps thundered outside. They were already here. The forest was pitch black, the only light coming from the flames engulfing Martin's cabin. The mercenaries had firebombed it after they escaped. Cross's men were making it clear they weren't leaving loose ends. Jack led Emma and Ava through the trees. His gun drawn, he could hear voices in the distance, barking orders. Flashlights cut through the darkness. We need to get to the road, Jack whispered. Martin was ahead of them, trying to access a remote safe vehicle stash he had hidden years ago. Suddenly, a gunshot rang out. A bullet tore into a tree just inches from Jack's head. They found us, Ava cried. Jack yanked them down behind a fallen log. Stay down. Martin, still sprinting, shouted. Cars ahead, 20 meters. Jack took a deep breath, then grabbed Emma and Ava's hands. On my count. 3, 2, 1, run. They bolted toward the clearing. The SUV was just ahead. Martin was already inside, hacking the security system to start the engine. Gunfire exploded behind them. Jack returned fire, hitting one of the pursuers. The others hesitated, buying them precious seconds. They reached the SUV, and Jack shoved the girls inside. Martin floored the gas, sending them hurtling onto the road. The mercenaries were left behind in the dust. Jack turned back to look at the twins. Their small hands trembled, their eyes filled with terror. He swore to himself, no matter what it took, he would keep them safe. But deep down, he knew this was far from over. By the time they reached a rundown motel on the outskirts of Albany, everyone was on edge. Jack locked the door, Checking the windows twice, Martin had hacked into the traffic cams, no sign of pursuit. But that didn't mean they weren't being watched. Emma sat on the bed, hugging her knees. They won't stop, will they? Jack sighed, sitting next to her. No, but neither will I. Ava whispered. Why us? Jack had no answer. Then Martin, still glued to his laptop, muttered, Guys, we have a problem. Jack's stomach sank. What now? Martin turned the screen toward them. A news broadcast played. Detective Jack Lawson, suspected in the abduction of 2 young girls, currently on the run from authorities. Jack's face flashed on the screen. Alongside Emma and Ava's. They had just been framed. The flickering motel television cast an eerie glow over the small room, highlighting the stunned expressions on everyone's faces. Jack couldn't believe what he was seeing. His own face, along with Emma and Ava's, was plastered across every major news channel in the country. Detective Jack Lawson is wanted for the alleged abduction of 2 young girls, Emma and Ava Carter, who were last seen in his custody following the violent murder of their guardian. Authorities believe Lawson may be armed and dangerous. Jack clenched his jaw, his fists tightening at his sides. He could feel the weight of Emma and Ava's stares on him, their innocent eyes filled with fear and uncertainty. Martin let out a low whistle. Damn, they work fast. Less than 24 hours and they've already turned you into a national fugitive. Jack ran a hand through his hair, pacing the length of the room. His mind raced, searching for options, but every path led to a dead end. He couldn't go back to the NYPD. His face was now public, which meant airports, train stations, and major highways were off limits. The only way out was under the radar. And even that window was closing fast. Ava's voice, small but firm, broke through his thoughts. They're trying to get rid of you. Jack turned to her, surprised by the determination in her voice. She wasn't panicked, she was thinking. Emma, sitting beside her on the edge of the bed, nodded slowly. They want you out of the way so they can take us. Jack crouched down in front of them. That's not gonna happen, he said, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. Martin rubbed his temples, then sighed. We need to assume they've frozen your accounts, flagged your badge, and put a tracking alert on your car. You can't make a move without them knowing. Jack exhaled sharply. So, what do we do? Martin tapped a few keys on his laptop, pulling up an encrypted file from the pendant chip. We play their game, but we play it our way. Jack narrowed his eyes. What do you mean? Martin turned the screen toward him. Nathaniel Cross isn't just some untouchable billionaire. He's been funding off the book's medical research through front companies. Some of those companies have deep ties to Project Gemini. He clicked to another page, displaying a secured meeting itinerary. He's scheduled to attend a private event in 2 days. High security, ultra exclusive. Jack frowned. And you think we can get to him there? Martin smirked. Not just get to him. Expose him. Jack glanced at the twins. They were still scared, but there was something else in their eyes now, hope. He made his decision. Then let's make this bastard pay. The next 24 hours were a blur of careful planning. Martin knew of a safe house, an old abandoned auto shop owned by a former cop who had disappeared years ago. It was off the grid, the kind of place only ghosts stayed in. Jack parked the stolen car behind the building, checking the surroundings before ushering Emma and Ava inside. The place smelled of rust, gasoline, and dust, but it was secure. Martin had set up his equipment in the back room, screens flashing with live feeds of police scanners and surveillance cameras. I've been monitoring their movements. They're sweeping the city, searching for any trace of you. Jack pulled out a burner phone and dialed a number. It rang twice before connecting. Jesus Christ, Jack. The voice on the other end belonged to Captain Reed, his former boss. Jack got straight to the point. You know I didn't take those girls. There was a long pause before Reed exhaled sharply. I figured, but you've been burned. Lawson, the whole force is under orders to take you in on sight. Someone in the department is feeding Cross information. Another pause. Then, I know. Jack's grip on the phone tightened. You know? Reed's voice lowered. There's a leak in the department. Someone high up. I've been trying to track it. But whoever it is, they're covering their tracks well. Jack swallowed hard. I need proof. Reed. And I need it fast. Reed hesitated. I might have something, but if I give it to you. We never spoke. You understand? Jack's chest tightened. Understood. Reed hung up. Jack lowered the phone, staring at the twins. Time to fight back. The plan was simple, but dangerous. Cross would be attending a private meeting at a luxury hotel in Manhattan. Under heavy security, Jack needed to get inside, gather evidence, and find a way to force Cross into the open. Martin hacked into the guest list, finding a perfect entry point, a politician's aide who had the right credentials but hadn't checked in yet. "We forge his ID, slip you in as him, and let you do what you do best," Martin said. Jack wasn't convinced. "What if I get made?" Martin smirked. "Then you improvise." They arrived at the hotel separately, using underground tunnels to avoid street-level cameras. Jack, now dressed in a tailored suit, adjusted his tie in the mirror. He looked the part. The lobby was a fortress, armed security at every entrance. Guests wearing million-dollar smiles as they sipped champagne. Jack moved smoothly through the crowd, keeping his head low. Then, he saw him. Nathaniel Cross stood near the bar, dressed in a charcoal suit, talking to two men in military uniforms. His presence radiated power and control. Jack knew he needed to act fast. He pressed the earpiece in his ear. "Martin, tell me you're in." Martin's voice crackled back. "Oh, I'm in. And guess what? Cross has a hidden lab. I just found the address." Jack's blood ran cold. The lab where they were experimenting on twins. "Where?" Jack demanded. But before Martin could answer, the fire alarm blared. "Shit," Martin cursed. "They found me." Jack spun around. Security guards were suddenly scanning the room. His cover was blown. Cross locked eyes with him across the room. And then, he smirked. Jack had been set up. Chaos erupted as security swarmed the lobby. Jack bolted for the nearest stairwell, shoving past panicked guests. "They were waiting for us," Martin shouted in his ear. "They baited you." Jack's heart pounded as he took the stairs 3 at a time. Heading for the rooftop, he needed an exit. Behind him, footsteps pounded against the steel steps. Security was gaining. When he burst onto the rooftop, the wind hit him hard. The city stretched endlessly below, a glittering web of lights and shadows. Then, a helicopter rose from the far side of the building. Nathaniel Cross stood beside it, a glass of whiskey in one hand, completely unbothered. Jack aimed his gun. "It's over, Cross." Cross took a sip of his drink. "Is it?" Before Jack could react, the door behind him slammed open. A fist connected with his ribs, sending him staggering. A massive enforcer had tackled him from behind. Jack twisted, elbowing the man in the throat before grabbing his gun and firing twice. The guard dropped. But it was too late. Cross was already boarding the helicopter. "You lose, detective," Cross called over the sound of the rotor blades. "The girls are mine." Jack ran forward, leaping onto the edge of the rooftop. He fired at the helicopter's engine, but the bullets ricocheted off the reinforced metal. The chopper lifted off. Cross vanished into the night. Jack stood there, breathless, watching his enemy escape. Emma and Ava were still in hiding. For now. But Jack knew one thing. Cross had just made this personal. Jack stood on the rooftop, the sound of the helicopter fading into the night. His breathing was ragged, his heart hammering in his chest as he stared at the sky. Cross had escaped. Worse, he had just made it clear, he was coming for the girls. Jack knew he couldn't waste a second. He sprinted back toward the rooftop door, reloading his gun as he descended the stairwell. His earpiece crackled with Martin's voice. "Jack, I've got bad news." Jack took the stairs 2 at a time. "Yeah, I already figured." "No, worse than that." Martin's voice was urgent. "Cross didn't just set you up. He's mobilizing assets. A full-scale manhunt. Cops, private security, even some shady government types. Every law enforcement agency within 100 miles just got an alert with your face on it. They want you dead, not arrested." Jack cursed under his breath. He had no time to process the full weight of the situation. He needed to get back to the girls. By the time he reached the lobby, the chaos had died down. Security guards were still scanning the room. But Jack had ditched his suit jacket, loosened his tie, and grabbed a discarded waiter's uniform on the way down. He kept his head low, slipping through the panicked guests until he reached an emergency exit in the back alley. He stepped outside into the cold night air. A black SUV sat idling at the curb. Jack's instincts screamed at him. He spun, gun drawn just as a figure stepped out of the shadows. Ethan Cole. The FBI agent held up his hands. Easy, Lawson. Jack didn't lower his weapon. You working for Cross? Ethan smirked. If I were, you'd be dead already. He nodded toward the car. You're out of time. Get in. Jack hesitated for only a second before he climbed in. The SUV peeled away from the alley, disappearing into the city. Ethan kept his eyes on the road. You need to disappear. Now. Jack shook his head. Not without the girls. Ethan's grip tightened on the wheel. You don't get it, do you? Cross isn't just some corrupt billionaire. He has people everywhere. The moment you step back into that city, you're dead. Jack glared at him. Then I'll just have to be faster. Ethan sighed. Damn it, Lawson. You're a pain in the ass. He hit the gas, pushing the SUV toward the outskirts of the city. Let's go get your girls. The safe house was eerily quiet when Jack and Ethan arrived. Martin had chosen the location for its seclusion, but Jack's gut twisted with unease. Ethan pulled up a quarter-mile away. We go in quiet. Jack nodded and moved through the shadows. His gun raised. The air was too still. The surrounding forest too silent. Something was off. Then he saw it. A single red laser dot. It moved across the front door. Jack grabbed Ethan and shoved him behind cover just as the first gunshot shattered the window. Shit, Ethan cursed, drawing his own gun. The trees lit up with flashes of muzzle fire. Cross's men were already here. Jack didn't hesitate. He returned fire, moving swiftly toward the house. He could see figures moving inside, Martin, hunched over his laptop, and the twins hiding in the corner. One of the attackers rushed the front entrance. Jack shot him before he could breach the door. Then another SUV screeched to a halt on the gravel road. And more gunmen piled out. We're outnumbered, Ethan growled, firing from cover. Jack ignored him, his mind laser-focused on one thing, getting to the girls. He sprinted for the back entrance. Kicking the door open, Martin spun around, his gun raised, but his face relaxed when he saw Jack. Jesus, you took your time, Martin snapped. They cut the power and jammed the cell signal. We are so screwed. Jack ignored him and knelt beside Emma and Ava. We have to move. Now. Emma's eyes were wide with fear. But Ava grabbed his arm. Jack, I think I know where they're taking the others. Jack froze. What? Ava swallowed hard. I keep seeing it. I don't know how, but I know. There's a place. A lab. They have more kids there. Jack exchanged a look with Martin. She's not wrong, Martin confirmed. I cracked more of the files. Cross has a hidden facility in upstate New York. If the girls are right, that's where he's keeping the missing twins. Jack's decision was immediate. Then that's where we're going. A gunshot punched through the wall, forcing them to duck. Ethan kicked open the back door. Less talking, more running. Jack grabbed the twins and bolted. They disappeared into the woods just as the safe house exploded behind them. The stolen pickup truck bounced along the dark road, the headlights barely illuminating the abandoned highway. Jack kept his foot on the gas. His eyes locked on the GPS coordinates Martin had pulled. The lab was hidden deep in the mountains, far from prying eyes. Ethan sat in the passenger seat, checking his ammo. This is suicide. You know that? Jack didn't respond. Martin sighed from the backseat. The facility is heavily fortified. High-tech security. Armed guards. We don't even know how many kids are inside. Jack glanced at Ava in the rearview mirror. She was staring out the window, her fingers twitching as if she was listening to something no one else could hear. She suddenly spoke. We don't have much time. Jack met her gaze. Why? Ava turned toward him. Because they're planning to erase everyone. The failed experiments. The ones who didn't meet expectations. They're going to. Her breath caught. They're going to kill them all. Jack's grip tightened on the wheel. Martin looked pale. How the hell does she know that? Jack didn't care. Then we move now. Ethan gritted his teeth. Fine, but if we're doing this, we do it smart. Jack nodded. We go in quiet, get the kids out, and burn the whole goddamn place to the ground. The storm was coming, and Jack was ready for war. The facility was massive, hidden beneath an abandoned factory deep in the mountains. Security drones patrolled the perimeter. Armed guards roamed the grounds. Jack, Ethan, and Martin crouched in the tree line. The twins stayed low, their small figures barely visible in the darkness. Martin tapped his laptop. I can kill the cameras for a few minutes. But after that, we're on our own. Jack turned to Ethan. You up for this? Ethan smirked. I was born for this. Jack looked at the twins. Stay close. No matter what happens, don't stop moving. Emma nodded. Ava whispered, I hear them. Jack frowned. Who? Ava's eyes were distant. The others. The kids inside. They know we're coming. Jack exhaled sharply and nodded. Then let's not keep them waiting. Martin shut down the security grid. Jack led the charge, moving fast and silent. Tonight, they were taking everything back. And if Cross thought he was untouchable, he was about to learn how wrong he was. The wind howled through the trees as Jack, Ethan, Martin, and the twins moved toward the facility. The massive structure loomed ahead. An old industrial plant repurposed into something far more sinister. The entrance was reinforced with steel, and spotlights swept across the perimeter. The air smelled of metal and cold decay. Martin whispered, We've got a 5-minute window before the security system reboots. Once that happens, we're running blind. Jack nodded and signaled to Ethan. The ex-FBI agent pulled out a silencer, aiming at the 2 guards patrolling the north entrance. The first shot was silent and lethal, the man dropping instantly. The second guard turned, but before he could react, Ethan's knife slashed across his throat. He collapsed, gurgling. Jack glanced back at the twins. Emma's face was pale, but Ava's expression was strangely calm, almost like she knew this would happen. Jack led them forward, pushing through the steel door. The moment they stepped inside, the temperature dropped. The air was stale, filled with the hum of machines. The underground corridors stretched in multiple directions, sterile and lifeless. Ethan checked the blueprint on Martin's tablet. Main lab should be 3 floors down. Jack whispered, Then let's move. They moved swiftly, sticking to the shadows. The further they went, the more inhuman the place felt. The walls were lined with observation windows, revealing rows of glass chambers filled with medical equipment. Inside, Jack could see children, unconscious, hooked up to IVs and monitors. Ava grabbed his arm, her small hands trembling. They're dreaming, she whispered, but it's not their dreams. Jack swallowed hard, feeling rage build inside him. They reached the elevator, but it was secured by a biometric scanner. Martin muttered, I can't hack this from here. We need a guard's hand. Ethan smirked, I'll go shopping. Before Jack could object, Ethan vanished down the hall. A few minutes later, they heard a muffled grunt, followed by a thud. Ethan returned, dragging an unconscious guard behind him. He pressed the man's limp hand to the scanner, and the elevator dinged open. Jack ushered the twins inside, gripping his gun tighter. Whatever happens down there, we get the kids out. No matter what. Ethan and Martin exchanged a glance before nodding. The doors slid shut, and the elevator descended into hell. The moment the elevator doors opened, Jack's stomach dropped. The underground lab was vast, stretching into a dimly lit expanse of high-tech equipment, medical stations, and reinforced holding cells. Monitors displayed vital signs of multiple children, each hooked up to machines pumping unknown chemicals into their veins. Jack felt sick. Martin whispered, This isn't science, it's torture. Ava suddenly winced, gripping her head. They're waking up. Before Jack could ask what she meant, a voice echoed through the intercom. I was wondering when you'd show up. Detective Lawson. Jack turned toward the far end of the room. There, standing behind a reinforced glass wall, was Nathaniel Cross. He was calm, dressed in an immaculate white suit, sipping a glass of whiskey. Jack raised his gun, but Cross laughed softly. Please, let's not be uncivilized, Cross said, his voice smooth as silk. You've done well making it this far. Truly impressive. Jack stepped forward. You're going to release the kids now. Cross sighed, almost amused. I don't think you understand, Lawson. These children are special, unique. Do you have any idea what we've been trying to accomplish here? Jack's finger tightened on the trigger. I don't care. I'm shutting this place down. Cross smiled. And how do you plan to do that? The lights suddenly flickered, and the chambers behind him started unlocking. Martin's eyes widened. Jack! He's waking them up. The glass doors hissed open, and several children stepped forward. Their eyes blank, movements stiff. Something was wrong. Ava gasped, gripping Emma's hand. They're not awake. Jack realized what Cross had done. These kids had been programmed, conditioned, and now, they were his weapons. Cross smiled coldly. Meet the future, detective. The first child lunged at them. Jack sidestepped the attack, but the child, no older than 10, moved inhumanly fast. Ethan fired a warning shot. But the bullet barely phased the kid. The others advanced, their movements robotic, eerily synchronized. Martin shouted, "They're not in control of themselves." Jack didn't want to hurt them. But they weren't stopping. He aimed for a tranquilizer gun on a nearby medical tray, grabbing it and firing at one of the children. The dart hit home, and the boy collapsed, unconscious. Ava suddenly screamed, clutching her head. Emma gasped, holding her sister up. Jack turned in alarm. "What's happening?" Cross's voice came through the speakers. Mocking. "Ah, the prodigy reacts. You see, Ava and Emma are the key. They are the perfect synchronization of the Gemini project." Ava's eyes snapped open, glowing faintly blue. Jack froze. Cross grinned. "And now, let's see what happens when you push them to their full potential." Ava's body tensed, and suddenly, every screen in the lab exploded. Sparks flying, the lights flickered violently, and the children in the room staggered, their controlled movements faltering. Emma grabbed Ava's shoulders. "Ava, stop, you're hurting yourself." Ava collapsed, breathing hard, but the mind control was broken. The children slumped to the ground, confused and scared. Jack didn't hesitate. "Martin, blow the servers. Erase everything." Martin nodded, rushing to the mainframe, setting explosives. Cross sighed over the intercom. "Pity, you could have been part of something revolutionary." "Lawson." Jack glared at the security cameras. "I'd rather burn it all to the ground." The alarms blared. Security forces were on their way. Jack scooped up Ava, pulling Emma close. "Time to go." Martin hit the detonator, and the entire lab erupted in flames. Jack and his team raced through the burning corridors, carrying as many kids as they could. Smoke filled the air, sirens wailing. They burst onto the rooftop, where a helicopter waited, Ethan's contingency plan. Jack loaded the twins and the rescued kids into the aircraft. "Get them out of here." Ethan hesitated. "What about you?" Jack's eyes burned with fury. "Cross isn't walking away from this." Ethan cursed but nodded. "Don't die, Lawson." The helicopter lifted off, carrying the children to safety. Jack turned back. Cross was standing near the flames, calm as ever. "You can't stop the inevitable," Cross said, smirking. "You think this ends with me?" Jack raised his gun. "This ends now." Cross laughed, right before Jack shot him in the chest. The billionaire staggered, blood staining his pristine suit. He stumbled backward, right into the flames. Jack watched as the fire consumed him. The facility collapsed around him. But Jack ran, leaping onto the final evacuation ladder from the helicopter. As they flew away, the burning wreckage of the lab vanished into the night. Jack held the twins close. "It's over," Emma whispered. "Not for us." Jack looked at her, realization dawning. Nathaniel Cross was dead, but his legacy wasn't. The war wasn't over. But for now, they had won the battle.